The woman's voice trembled as she begged for more time, her threadbare dress dusty from the Nevada wind, and Russell Quinn could see from 50 feet away that the banker had no mercy in his eyes. Russell had ridden into Belmont, Nevada that scorching afternoon in August of 1878, with nothing but his horse, his rifle, and the last of his wages from a cattle drive that had taken him clear from Texas to the northern ranges. He had been looking for a place to get a decent meal and maybe some whiskey to wash down the trail dust when he heard the commotion outside the general store. The sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden sidewalks, and heat shimmered off the dirt road as he dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post with practiced ease. The banker was a portly man in a suit far too heavy for the desert heat, his face red and perspiring as he jabbed a finger at the young woman who stood before him with her hands clasped together. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, Russell estimated, with dark hair pinned back under a faded bonnet and eyes the color of spring grass even from this distance. Her face was pale despite the heat, and he could see the desperation written in every line of her body. "Miss Vaughn, I have been patient for 6 months now," the banker said loudly, clearly wanting an audience for his display of authority. "Your father's debts became yours when he passed, and the bank will not wait any longer. You owe us $230, and if you cannot pay by the end of this week, we will be forced to take possession of your property." "Please, Mr. Henderson, I just need a little more time," the woman said, and Russell could hear the tears in her voice, even though she fought to keep them from falling. "The harvest was poor this year because of the drought, but I have been taking in sewing and laundry, and I promise I will pay every cent. Just please, do not take my home. It is all I have left of my family." "That is not my concern," Henderson said coldly. "Business is business, Miss Vaughn. The bank has been more than generous in extending your deadline as it is." Russell felt something stir in his chest, something that had been dormant for a long time. He had spent the past 5 years drifting from town to town, taking whatever work he could find, trying to outrun memories of a family farm burned by raiders during the war and parents who had died defending it. He had learned to keep his head down and mind his own business because getting involved in other people's troubles usually meant trouble for himself. But there was something about the way this young woman held herself with dignity, even in her desperation, that reminded him of his own mother, who had faced down those raiders with nothing but courage and a shotgun. Before he quite knew what he was doing, Russell found his boots carrying him across the dusty street toward the confrontation. Several townspeople had gathered to watch, some with sympathy on their faces, and others with the cold curiosity of those who enjoyed watching others suffer. Russell pushed his hat back slightly and cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hot afternoon air. "How much does she owe you, sir, today?" Both the banker and the young woman turned to look at him with identical expressions of surprise. Henderson's eyes narrowed as he took in Russell's dusty trail clothes and the worn holster at his hip, clearly categorizing him as some drifter who had no business interfering in banking matters. "This does not concern you, stranger," Henderson said dismissively. "This is a private matter between the bank and Miss Vaughn." "You were conducting it pretty publicly just now," Russell pointed out mildly. "And you did not answer my question. How much does she owe?" $230, Henderson snapped. "Not that it is any of your affair. Now, if you will excuse us." Russell reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the leather pouch that contained his wages from the drive. He had been planning to use that money to maybe buy some land of his own, to finally stop drifting and put down roots somewhere. It represented 3 months of hard work, sleeping on the ground, eating dust, and nursing cattle across hundreds of miles of rough territory. But as he looked at the young woman's face, at the way hope and disbelief warred in her expression, he knew he could not walk away. "I will pay it," he said simply, counting out the bills and coins. $230, you said? "Now wait just a minute," Henderson sputtered, clearly not having expected this turn of events. "Who are you? What is your interest in this matter?" "My name is Russell Quinn, and my interest is that I do not like seeing a lady harassed on a public street," Russell said evenly. He held out the money. "Take it and give the lady a receipt showing her debt is paid in full." The young woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, I cannot. Sir, you do not understand. That is too much money. I cannot accept such charity from a stranger." Russell turned to look at her properly for the first time and felt something shift in his chest when their eyes met. Up close, she was even prettier than he had thought, with delicate features and a strength in her gaze that spoke of someone who had endured hardship and not broken under it. "It is not charity, miss," he said gently. "Consider it a loan, if that sits better with you. You can pay me back when you are able." "But I do not even know you," she whispered, and he could see tears starting to slide down her cheeks now, despite her efforts to hold them back. "Why would you do this?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Russell said simply. He turned back to Henderson, who was looking between them with calculation in his eyes. "Well, are you going to take the money or not?" Henderson clearly wanted to refuse, but business was business, as he had said, and money was money. He reached out and snatched the bills and coins from Russell's hand, counting them with quick, practiced movements. When he was satisfied that the full amount was there, he pulled a receipt book from his pocket and scribbled on it, tearing off the page and thrusting it at the young woman. "Your debt is satisfied, Miss Vaughn," he said stiffly. "The bank will send someone to update the property records." He shot Russell a nasty look. "I hope you know what you are getting yourself into, stranger. That farm of hers is nothing but rocks and dust. You will never see that money again." With that, Henderson turned and stalked away, his expensive shoes kicking up dust as he went. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, some casting curious glances back at Russell and the young woman. Russell suddenly felt awkward, unsure of what to say now that the immediate crisis had been resolved. "Thank you," the woman said softly, clutching the receipt in both hands as if it were made of gold. There are no words to properly thank you for what you just did. You saved my home, my livelihood, everything." "You are welcome, miss," Russell said, tipping his hat to her. "I hope things get easier for you from here on out." He started to turn away, to go back to his horse and ride out of town before he could second-guess the impulse that had just cost him every cent he owned, but her voice stopped him. "Wait, please," she called out, and he turned back to see her hurrying toward him. "You said it was a loan. I will pay you back, I swear it, but I need to know where to find you, and I do not even know your name properly." "Russell Quinn," he said, extending his hand. She took it, and he was surprised by the strength of her grip despite how delicate her fingers looked. "Diana Vaughn," she said. "My farm is about 3 miles west of town, near the creek. It is not much, but I have a barn with a spare stall if your horse needs rest, and I could offer you supper as a small start toward repaying my debt to you." Russell knew he should decline, should just ride on out of Belmont and try to find more work to rebuild his savings. Getting involved further with Diana Vaughn would only complicate things. But he found himself nodding before his common sense could catch up with his mouth. "I appreciate that, Miss Vaughn," he said. "My horse could use some water and rest, and I will confess I have not had a proper home-cooked meal in months." Her face brightened considerably, and Russell realized she had a beautiful smile when she was not weighted down by worry and fear. "Then please, follow me. It is not far." They walked together down the main street of Belmont, Russell leading his horse by the reins while Diana walked beside him. The town was small but bustling, with a handful of saloons, a hotel, the general store, and various other businesses that served the mining operations in the surrounding hills. Nevada had been a state for over a decade now, and Belmont had seen better days during the initial silver boom, but there was still enough ore coming out of the ground to keep the town alive. "Have you been in Belmont long?" Diana asked as they walked, clearly trying to make conversation despite the emotional upheaval she had just experienced. "Just rode in today," Russell admitted. "I've been on a cattle drive from Texas up to Wyoming territory, was heading back south and thought I would stop here for a few days before moving on." "Are you a cowboy then?" she asked, glancing at him with interest. "That is as good a description as any," Russell said. "I've done a bit of everything over the years. Ranch work, cattle driving, some mining, even tried my hand at farming for a while. I go where the work is." "That must be a hard life, never staying in one place," Diana observed. Russell shrugged. "It suits me well enough. No ties, no responsibilities beyond the job at hand. A man can get into trouble when he tries to put down roots." He saw a shadow cross Diana's face at that, and realized she probably thought he was implying she was trouble for having property and debts. "I did not mean," he started, but she held up a hand. No offense taken, Mr. Quinn. I understand that not everyone wants the weight of land and home. There are days I envy the freedom you must have." They left the main street behind and followed a dusty road that wound westward through scrubland, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional scraggly juniper tree. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that were almost beautiful enough to make Russell forget how brutally hot the day had been. After about 30 minutes of walking, a small farmstead came into view. It was humble almost to the point of being pitiful, Russell had to admit. The house was a simple one-room cabin with a covered porch, the wood weathered gray by sun and wind. There was a barn that looked like it had seen better days, a chicken coop, and a few fields that showed evidence of attempted cultivation, but looked parched and struggling in the Nevada heat. It is not much," Diana said quietly, following his gaze with obvious embarrassment. "My father built this place 15 years ago when he first came out here. He had dreams of making it a prosperous farm, but the land is hard and the water scarce. After my mother died 5 years ago, he kind of gave up. He started borrowing from the bank to make ends meet, and then he got sick last winter and the debts just kept piling up." "I am sorry for your loss," Russell said, and meant it. "Both your parents." "Thank you," Diana said. "Come, let me show you where you can stable your horse, and then I will start supper." The barn was dim and smelled of hay and animal warmth. Diana showed him an empty stall next to where her own horse, a bay mare that looked as tired and work-worn as everything else on the property, was housed. Russell unsaddled his horse and brushed him down, making sure he had water and feed, while Diana watched from the doorway. "You are good with horses," she observed. "Spend enough time around them," Russell said. "A cowboy who does not treat his horse right does not stay a cowboy for long." When his horse was settled, Russell followed Diana to the house. The interior was as simple as the exterior suggested, with a single room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sleeping quarters, though Russell noticed a curtain that could be drawn to separate a bed in one corner. The furnishings were sparse but clean, and there were small touches that spoke of a woman's care: wildflowers in a jar on the table, curtains at the windows, a quilt on the bed that showed evidence of skilled needlework. "Please sit," Diana said, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs at the small table. "I do not have much, but I can make biscuits and beans, and I have some salt pork I have been saving." "That sounds like a feast to me," Russell said honestly. "Most nights on the trail, I was lucky to have coffee and jerky." Diana moved around the kitchen area with practiced efficiency, building up the fire in the stove and pulling out supplies from a small pantry. Russell watched her work, noting the way she measured out ingredients carefully, making everything stretch as far as possible. It was clear she had been living on the edge of poverty for some time. "Can I help with anything?" he offered, feeling awkward just sitting there. "You can tell me about yourself," Diana said, glancing over her shoulder with a slight smile. "Where are you from originally? Do you have family somewhere?" Russell hesitated, old habit making him reluctant to share too much about his past. But Diana had been through enough today, and she had opened her home to him despite being a stranger. The least he could do was offer some honesty in return. "I am from Missouri originally," he said slowly. "My parents had a farm there, nothing fancy but enough to support us. I had 2 younger sisters. When the war came, things got bad. Raiders came through in the autumn of 1863, taking what they wanted and burning the rest. My parents died defending the farm. My sisters and I survived, but there was nothing left. They went to live with an aunt in St. Louis, and I headed west. I have been moving around ever since." Diana had stopped working and was looking at him with such compassion in her eyes that Russell had to look away. "I am so sorry," she said softly. "That's a terrible thing to have lived through. How old were you?" 17, Russell said. "Old enough to have fought, I suppose, but my father did not believe in the war. He said it was rich men sending poor men to die for their causes, and he wanted no part of it. I guess the Raiders did not care about his politics." "And your sisters? Do you stay in touch with them?" Russell nodded. "I write when I can. Martha got married a few years back to a shopkeeper. Caroline is teaching school. They are good women, both of them. They wanted me to come to St. Louis and settle down there, but I could not do it. Every time I try to stay in one place for too long, I start to feel like the walls are closing in." Diana returned to her cooking, but Russell could sense she was thinking about what he had told her. After a few minutes, she said, "I think I understand that feeling. After my parents died, there were days I wanted nothing more than to sell this place and go somewhere else, anywhere else. Start fresh where nobody knew me as poor Diana Vaughn with her failing farm and her dead parents. But I could not do it. This land, this house, hard as it is all I have of them. My father's dreams are buried here, and my mother's flower garden used to be right outside that window before the drought killed it. Leaving would feel like abandoning them all over again. That is not the same as what I feel, Russell said quietly. You are staying because of love and loyalty. I keep moving because I am afraid. Afraid that if I care about something again, it will be taken away just like before. The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Russell had intended to be. Diana turned from the stove and met his eyes, and something passed between them that made Russell's heart beat a little faster. Maybe, Diana said slowly, we are both running from different things, but tonight, neither of us has to run. Tonight we can just be two people sharing a meal in some company. I would like that, Russell said, and realized he meant it more than he had meant anything in a long time. They ate dinner as the sun set outside the windows, painting the sparse room in shades of gold and amber. The food was simple but good, and Russell found himself enjoying not just the meal but the conversation. Diana was easy to talk to, with a quick mind and a sense of humor that surprised him, given the hardships she had endured. She told him about growing up in Nevada, about her mother teaching her to read and write and sew, about her father's stories of the early days of the mining boom, when Belmont had been wild and full of prospectors with more hope than sense. He used to say that Nevada was a place where anyone could make their fortune if they were willing to work hard enough, Diana said, a wistful smile on her face. I think he really believed that, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. He was an optimist, my father. The world needs optimists, Russell said. They are the ones who keep going when realists would give up. Are you a realist, then? Diana asked, tilting her head to look at him. I try to be, Russell admitted, though I suppose paying off a stranger's debt without any real hope of being repaid is not particularly realistic. Diana's expression grew serious. I will pay you back, Mr. Quinn. I give you my word on that. It may take time, but I will do it. I believe you, Russell said, and please call me Russell. Mr. Quinn makes me sound like my father. Russell, then, Diana said, and he liked the way his name sounded in her voice. And you must call me Diana. As the evening wore on, Russell helped Diana clean up from supper, and then they sat on the porch together watching the stars come out. The desert night was cool after the heat of the day, and the sky was so clear that it seemed like there were millions of stars overhead, more than Russell remembered seeing even on the open range. I should probably head back to town and find a room at the hotel, Russell said, though he found himself reluctant to leave the peaceful atmosphere of Diana's little farm. You are welcome to sleep in the barn if you would rather save your money, Diana offered. The hayloft is clean, and it would be no trouble. Russell knew he should decline, should put some distance between himself and this woman who had already stirred up feelings he had thought long buried. But his funds were gone, spent on her debt, and he would need to find work soon if he wanted to eat. Saving the cost of a hotel room made practical sense. If you are sure it would not be an imposition, he said, after what you did for me today. You could sleep in the barn for a year and it would not repay the debt, Diana said firmly. Come, I will get you some blankets. She disappeared into the house and returned with an armload of blankets and a pillow that looked like it might have come from her own bed. Russell took them with thanks and made his way to the barn, settling into the hayloft with a comfort born of many nights sleeping in similar conditions. The hay was sweet-smelling and soft, and through the gaps in the barn walls he could see the lights from Diana's house. He lay awake for a long time, thinking about the choices he had made that day. $230 was a huge sum to spend on impulse, especially for a drifter with no guarantee of future work. And yet, as he remembered the look on Diana's face when Henderson had been harassing her, and the gratitude and hope in her eyes when Russell had paid her debt, he could not bring himself to regret it. There was something about Diana Vaughn that called to something deep inside him, something he had tried to bury 15 years ago when his parents died. She was strong and brave and determined, facing impossible odds with grace and dignity. She reminded him of why he had come west in the first place, searching for something he could not quite name. Maybe, just maybe, he had found it in a dusty little farm outside Belmont, Nevada. The next morning, Russell woke to the sound of chickens and the smell of coffee. He climbed down from the hayloft and washed up at the pump outside the barn, then made his way to the house. Diana was already up and dressed, her hair pinned back in an apron over her simple dress. "Good morning," she said brightly. "I hope you slept well. I have coffee ready and I am making flapjacks if you are hungry." "I slept fine, thank you," Russell said, accepting the cup of coffee she poured for him. "And I'm always hungry." Over breakfast, Russell broached the subject that had been on his mind since waking. "I need to find work," he said. "My funds are pretty much depleted after yesterday, and I will need money for supplies and such. Do you know if anyone in town is hiring?" Diana frowned thoughtfully. "The mines are always looking for workers, but that is hard, dangerous work. The ranchers sometimes need hands, but most of the big ranches are further south. There might be work in town, at the hotel or the saloons, but I do not know for certain." Russell nodded, considering his options. Then a thought occurred to him. "What about here? You said you have been struggling to keep up with the farm. I could work for you, help get things in better shape. You would not have to pay me in cash, just room and board would be enough for now." Diana looked startled. "I could not ask you to do that. This place barely supports me, let alone 2 people. "You are not asking, I am offering," Russell pointed out. "Look, I can see you have work that needs doing. The barn needs repairs, those fields need attention, and I bet there are a dozen other tasks you have been putting off, because you do not have the time or the strength to manage them alone. Let me help. It would give me a place to stay while I figure out my next move, and it would help you get the farm in better condition. Maybe then you could have a better harvest and start getting ahead instead of just barely surviving." Diana bit her lip, clearly torn between pride and practicality. "It would not be proper," she said slowly. "You sleeping in the barn and working here, people will talk." "Let them talk," Russell said. "Anyone with eyes can see you need help, and anyone with sense will understand that a man helping with farm work is not scandalous. Besides, if it bothers you that much, I can make a point of going into town regularly so people see I am not always here." Diana was silent for a long moment, and Russell could see her working through the decision. Finally, she met his eyes and nodded. "All right," she said, "but we do this properly. I will pay you when I can, and we keep everything above board, and if at any point you want to move on, you are free to do so with no hard feelings." "Deal," Russell said, extending his hand across the table. Diana took it, and they shook on the arrangement. Over the next several weeks, Russell threw himself into the work of improving Diana's farm. He started with the barn, replacing boards that had rotted and fixing the roof where it leaked. He mended fences and cleared brush from the fields, preparing the soil for planting when the season turned. Diana worked alongside him whenever she could, and Russell found himself impressed by her determination and strength. She might have been small and delicate-looking, but she could work as hard as many men he had known. They fell into a comfortable routine. Russell would wake before dawn and tend to the animals, then work in the fields or on whatever repair project was most urgent. Diana would manage the house and the chickens, do her sewing and laundry work for town customers, and prepare meals for them both. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. Russell learned that Diana had been engaged once to a young man who had worked in the mines. But he had died in a cave 2 years ago, and she had not considered marrying since then. "I loved him," she told Russell one evening, her voice soft with memory. "But after he died, I realized I did not know if I loved him or if I just loved the idea of not being alone anymore. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Russell said. "Loneliness can make us reach for comfort in whatever form we can find it." "Are you lonely?" Diana asked, turning to look at him in the fading light. Russell considered the question seriously. "I have been," he admitted. "For a long time I told myself I preferred being alone, that it was simpler and safer. But lately I've been thinking maybe I was just afraid of letting anyone get close enough to matter." "And now?" Diana asked, and there was something in her voice that made Russell's heart speed up. "Now I think maybe I've been wrong about a lot of things," Russell said carefully. "Maybe running is not the answer. Maybe the risk of caring is worth it." Their eyes met in the twilight, and Russell saw his own feelings reflected in Diana's gaze. Without quite meaning to, he reached out and took her hand. Her fingers curled around his, strong and warm, and they sat like that in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. The people of Belmont gradually accepted Russell's presence at Diana's farm. Some of the more conservative townspeople clucked their tongues about propriety, but most folks could see that the farm was improving under Russell's care, and Diana seemed happier than she had been in years. The banker Henderson made a few pointed comments about Russell no doubt planning to marry Diana for her property. But those comments fell flat when people pointed out that Diana had no money, and her property was barely worth the debt Russell had paid off. Russell found work in town when he could, taking odd jobs that paid in cash and helping Diana build up a small savings. He also helped her expand her sewing business, building a better chicken coop so she could sell eggs in town and repairing her wagon so she could make deliveries herself instead of paying others to do it. Slowly but surely, Diana's financial situation began to improve. One evening in late October, as the weather was beginning to cool and the first hints of autumn color touched the landscape, Russell and Diana were working together to harvest the last of the garden vegetables they had managed to coax from the stubborn soil. The harvest was not huge, but it was better than Diana had managed in years, and there would be enough to sell some in town and put away stores for winter. "I cannot believe how much better everything looks," Diana said, surveying the farm with satisfaction. "The barn is solid, the fields are cleared, and we actually have produce to sell. You have worked miracles here, Russell." "We worked miracles," Russell corrected gently. "I could not have done any of this without you working right alongside me." Diana smiled at him, and Russell felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. Over the past months, his feelings for Diana had grown from respect and attraction into something deeper, something that scared him with its intensity. He found himself thinking about her constantly when they were apart, and treasuring every moment they spent together. She was smart and funny and brave, and she made him want to be a better man than he had been. "Diana," he said, setting down the basket of vegetables he had been carrying, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, her expression curious. "What is it?" Russell took a deep breath, suddenly more nervous than he had been facing down rustlers or wild animals on the trail. "I came to Belmont planning to pass through, to keep on drifting like I've been doing for years. But then I met you, and everything changed. These past months working alongside you, getting to know you, they have been the best months of my life. You make me want to stop running, to put down roots and build something lasting." Diana's eyes had grown wide, and Russell could see her pulse fluttering at her throat. "Russell," she whispered, but he pressed on before he could lose his courage. "I love you, Diana," he said simply. "I am probably not saying this right, and I know I do not have much to offer. I am just a drifter with a horse and some hard-earned skills. But if you will have me, I want to stay here with you. I want to help you build this farm into something prosperous. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to be the man you deserve, if you will give me the chance." For a moment, Diana just stared at him, and Russell felt his heart sink, certain he had misread the signs and ruined everything with his declaration. But then tears began sliding down her cheeks, and she was laughing and crying at the same time as she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said fervently. "Yes, Russell, I will have you. I love you too. I have loved you since the day you stepped in to help me with Mr. Henderson, and I have fallen deeper in love with you every single day since then. You are brave and kind and good, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Russell pulled her close and kissed her, and it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Diana kissed him back with a passion that matched his own, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless and grinning like fools. "We should get married," Russell said. "Properly, with a ceremony and everything. I know I do not have much money saved up yet, but we can have a simple wedding, and I promise I will work hard to give you the life you deserve." "I do not need a fancy wedding," Diana said, her eyes shining with happiness. "I just need you. But yes, let us get married. Let us build a life together here, on this land that has seen so much struggle. We will make it into something beautiful." They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Belmont with half the town in attendance. Diana wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace borrowed from one of her customers in town, and Russell wore the best clothes he could afford on his limited budget. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Russell kissed his bride with such obvious love and joy that several of the women in attendance sighed and dabbed at their eyes. The townspeople had taken up a collection as a wedding gift, presenting Russell and Diana with $50 and an assortment of household goods that would help them set up their life together properly. Even Henderson the banker attended, though he looked sour about the whole affair, and made a pointed comment about hoping Russell knew what he was getting into. "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Russell told him with a smile. "I'm getting a wife I love and a home I can build into something lasting. I reckon I'm about the luckiest man in Nevada." The first year of their marriage was not easy, but it was happy. Russell continued to work odd jobs in town while also managing the farm, and Diana expanded her sewing business and began selling baked goods as well. They worked from dawn to dusk most days, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. The farm slowly became more prosperous, and they were able to save a little money each month, building toward a more secure future. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Diana told Russell she was pregnant. He whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she was laughing and begging him to put her down before he made her dizzy. They spent hours that night talking about the baby, about names and dreams and what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our children to know stability," Russell said, his hand resting gently on Diana's still flat belly. "I want them to grow up knowing they are loved and safe, without the kind of violence and loss I experienced." "They will," Diana promised. "We will make sure of it. We will build something good here, something lasting that we can pass down to them." Their son was born in January of 1880, during a cold snap that had Russell frantically keeping fires burning in both the house and barn. Diana labored through the night with the help of the town midwife, and when Russell finally got to hold his son for the first time, he wept with joy and relief and a bone-deep gratitude that this tiny, perfect human existed. They named him Robert, after Russell's father, and from the moment he arrived, their lives revolved around him. Robert was a healthy, happy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and both Russell and Diana doted on him shamelessly. As Robert grew from infant to toddler, the farm continued to prosper. Russell had proven to have a knack for managing water resources, and he had built an irrigation system that allowed them to grow more crops even in the dry Nevada climate. They expanded their chicken operation and added a few pigs, and Diana's baked goods became popular enough that the hotel in town started buying from her regularly. 3 years after Robert was born, Diana gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace. Russell joked that he was now hopelessly outnumbered by females in his household, but anyone who saw him with his daughters could tell he was completely enchanted by them. They were identical twins with their mother's delicate features and their father's serious expressions, and they kept both parents on their toes with their energy and curiosity. The years passed with the comfortable rhythm of family life and hard work. Russell never regretted his decision to pay Diana's debt that hot afternoon in 1878, and he never regretted staying in Belmont when every instinct had told him to keep drifting. He had found something here that was worth more than all the freedom of the open trail: love, family, and a place to call home. By the time Russell turned 40, in the year 1886, the little farm that had once been on the verge of foreclosure had become one of the most successful small operations in the region. They had expanded their land holdings, adding parcels as they became available, and they employed 2 hired hands to help with the work. Diana had turned her sewing and baking into a real business, with a proper shop in town that another woman ran for her while she managed the farm and raised the children. Robert was 6 now, and already showing signs of his father's practical nature and work ethic. The twins were 3, and into everything with the fearless curiosity of young children who knew they were loved and protected. The farm had become exactly what Russell and Diana had envisioned on their wedding day, something beautiful, built from struggle and hard work and unwavering love. One evening, Russell and Diana sat on their porch watching the sunset over the mountains. They had built a proper house now, with multiple rooms and a real kitchen, though Diana had insisted on keeping some of the wood from the original cabin incorporated into the structure as a reminder of where they had started. The children were asleep inside, worn out from a day of play and learning, and for a moment it was just Russell and Diana together in the peaceful twilight. "Do you ever think about that day?" Diana asked softly, and Russell did not need to ask which day she meant. The day you paid my debt? I think about it often, Russell admitted. I think about how different my life would be if I had just kept riding through Belmont that day. I would probably still be drifting, still running from the past, still alone. I think about it too, Diana said. I was so desperate that day, so afraid. I thought I was going to lose everything, and then you appeared like something out of a story. My knight in dusty cowboy clothes. Russell laughed. I am not sure I qualify as a knight. I was just a man who saw someone in trouble and decided to help. You were exactly what I needed, Diana said, reaching over to take his hand. You gave me hope when I had none, and then you stayed and helped me build something better than I ever could have managed alone. You gave me love and family and a future. I will never stop being grateful for that day, and for every day since. Russell raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I am the one who should be grateful. You taught me that it is possible to put down roots without losing myself. You showed me that love does not make you weak. It makes you stronger. You and our children are the best thing that ever happened to me. They sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear one of the twins crying out from a dream, and Diana started to rise, but Russell stopped her. I will go, he said. You rest. He went inside and found Emma sitting up in her bed, rubbing her eyes and looking confused. Papa? She said sleepily. I am right here, sweetheart, Russell said, sitting on the edge of her bed and gathering her into his arms. Did you have a bad dream? Emma nodded against his chest. I dreamed you went away and did not come back. Russell felt his heart clench. That is not going to happen, he promised, holding her close. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, right here with you and your sister and your brother and your mama. I will always come back to you. Promise? Emma whispered. Promise, Russell said firmly. Now, how about I tell you a story to help you fall back asleep? He tucked Emma back into bed and began telling her about the wild horses he had seen in Wyoming Territory years ago, before she and her siblings were born, before he had met their mother. He told her about the beauty of the open plains and the majesty of the mountains, but he also told her about the loneliness of that life, and how much better it was to have people to love and come home to. Emma fell asleep before he finished the story, her little face peaceful and trusting. Russell sat with her for a few more minutes, looking at his sleeping daughter and feeling a wave of fierce protective love wash over him. These children, this family, they were his purpose now. They were what he had been searching for during all those years of drifting, even though he had not known it at the time. When he returned to the porch, Diana was still there, waiting for him. Everything all right? She asked. Everything is perfect, Russell said, settling back into his chair and reaching for her hand again. Emma had a nightmare, but she's fine now. You are a good father, Diana said. The children adore you. I adore them right back, Russell said. I never imagined I could be this happy, Diana. I never thought I deserved it. We all deserve happiness, Diana said gently. We all deserve love and family and a place to belong. I'm just grateful we found it with each other. As the years continued to pass, the Quinn family became a fixture in Belmont. Russell and Diana were known for their generosity, often helping neighbors in need just as Russell had once helped Diana. They never forgot what it was like to struggle, and they made sure their children understood the value of hard work and compassion. Robert grew into a thoughtful young man who loved working the land and showed a talent for the irrigation techniques his father had pioneered. The twins grew into bright, energetic girls who kept everyone around them entertained with their antics and intelligence. In 1888, Diana gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel, and 2 years after that, another daughter they named Lily. The farm continued to prosper, and Russell and Diana were able to pay back the original debt Russell had given to Diana, though by that point it had become almost symbolic since they shared everything anyway. They talked sometimes about expanding into town, maybe buying a larger store or investing in one of the businesses, but they both agreed they were happiest on the farm, working the land and raising their children in the open air and sunshine. In 1890, when Russell was 44 and Diana was 40, they decided to host a celebration for their 10th wedding anniversary. They invited everyone they knew in Belmont and the surrounding area, and people came from miles around to celebrate with them. Tables were set up in the yard with food and drink, and music played well into the night as people danced and laughed and celebrated. Henderson the banker even showed up, though he was old and grumpy now, retired from active banking but still living in Belmont. He approached Russell as the evening was winding down, a glass of punch in his hand, and an expression that might have been grudging respect on his face. "I was wrong about you, Quinn," he said without preamble. "When you paid that girl's debt, I thought you were a fool who would lose everything, but you proved me wrong. You built something real here." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Russell said, surprised by the admission. "That means something, coming from you." Henderson grunted. "Do not let it go to your head. You just happened to get lucky finding a woman willing to work as hard as you do." He paused, then added more quietly, "But luck only takes you so far. The rest was character, and you have that in spades. I will give you that." After Henderson wandered off, Diana came to stand beside Russell, sliding her arm through his. "What did Mr. Henderson want?" she asked. "To admit he was wrong about us," Russell said with a smile. "I think that might have been the closest thing to an apology we will ever get from him." Diana laughed. "Well, he was wrong about us. We proved everyone wrong who thought this would not work." "We did," Russell agreed, pulling her close. "We built something amazing here, Diana. Something that will outlast us and hopefully give our children and grandchildren a solid foundation to build their own lives on." "Do you ever regret it?" Diana asked, "giving up the freedom of the trail, settling down here?" Russell looked around at the farm they had built together, at their children playing in the yard with the other children from town, at the friends and neighbors who had gathered to celebrate with them. He thought about the years of hard work and struggle, but also about the love and joy and deep satisfaction that had come from building this life with Diana. "Not for a single second," he said honestly. "This is where I was always meant to be. I just had to wander a bit to find my way here." Diana smiled up at him, her green eyes still as bright and beautiful as they had been the day he first saw her being harassed by Henderson. "I love you, Russell Quinn," she said. "I love you too, Diana Quinn," he replied, and kissed her as the stars wheeled overhead and their children laughed in the background, secure and happy in the world their parents had built for them. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of seasons and the comfortable patterns of family life. Robert grew tall and strong, eventually marrying a girl from a neighboring ranch and starting a family of his own on a piece of land Russell and Diana gave him as a wedding present. The twins became young ladies known throughout the region for their intelligence and spirit, both of them pursuing teaching careers that took them to schools in Nevada and beyond, though they always came home for holidays and important family occasions. Samuel showed an interest in the business side of farming, and he eventually took over much of the management of the farm's finances and sales, freeing Russell to focus on the physical work he had always loved. Lily, the youngest, had inherited her mother's talent for sewing and baking, and she talked about someday expanding Diana's shop into something even larger. By the time Russell turned 55 in the year 1901, he had become something of an elder statesman in Belmont. Young farmers came to him for advice on irrigation and crop management, and he was frequently called upon to mediate disputes or offer counsel. He and Diana had become the kind of couple that younger people looked to as an example of what a successful marriage should be, built on mutual respect, shared work, and enduring love. One evening in the summer of 1901, Russell and Diana took a rare evening away from the farm to ride up into the hills overlooking their property. They had done this occasionally over the years, taking time to remember where they had started and appreciate how far they had come. From this vantage point, they could see the whole spread, the house and barn, the fields green with growing crops thanks to Russell's irrigation systems, the orchard they had planted years ago now bearing fruit, and in the distance, the shapes of cattle grazing on land they had bought to expand their operation. 23 years, Diana said softly, leaning against Russell as they sat on a large rock overlooking their domain. 23 years since you rode into Belmont and changed my life forever. Changed both our lives, Russell corrected. I was lost before I met you, Diana. I did not even know it, but I was. You gave me a purpose, a reason to stop running and start building. We gave each other that, Diana said. I could not have done any of this alone. I would have lost the farm, probably would have ended up working in a saloon or taking in laundry for barely enough to survive. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." Russell pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I used to think that paying your debt was the best thing I ever did," he said. "But I was wrong. The best thing I ever did was asking if I could stay and help you build something better. Everything good in my life came from that decision." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. The evening breeze was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of sage and growing things, and from far below they could hear the faint sounds of their children and grandchildren going about their evening routines. "What do you think will happen to this place when we are gone?" Diana asked thoughtfully. "Will our children keep it going, or will they sell it and move on to their own dreams?" "I think they will keep it," Russell said confidently. "Not because they have to, but because we have taught them that this land represents something important. It represents what can be built when people work together and refuse to give up. It represents love made tangible, dreams turned into reality through hard work and determination. That is a legacy worth preserving." "I hope you are right," Diana said. "I would hate to think of all this work being undone, this land returning to the dust and sagebrush it was when my father first claimed it." "It will not happen," Russell promised. "Our children understand what this place means. They understand what we built here, and they will protect it." As if to prove his point, they saw Samuel riding up the trail toward them, sitting tall in the saddle in a way that reminded Russell of himself at that age. Samuel reined in when he reached them, tipping his hat respectfully. "Mama, Papa, I hope I am not interrupting," Samuel said, "but I wanted to catch you before it got too dark. I've been going over the accounts, and I think we might have enough saved to buy the Harrison property if it comes up for sale like we heard it might." Russell and Diana exchanged a glance, both of them pleased that Samuel had sought them out to discuss business, even though he was perfectly capable of managing the finances on his own. "What do you think we should do?" Russell asked his son. "You have a good head for these things." Samuel considered carefully before answering. "I think we should buy it if the price is right. The land borders ours and has good water access. It would allow us to expand the cattle operation, and Robert has been saying he wants to try his hand at that more seriously. We could make it work, I think, and it would secure our position here for another generation." "Then make the arrangements," Diana said with a smile. "Your father and I trust your judgment, Samuel. You have never steered us wrong yet." Samuel grinned, his face lighting up with the same enthusiasm Russell remembered feeling when he was young and building this farm with Diana. "I will, Mama. Thank you for trusting me with this." After Samuel rode back down the hill, Russell turned to Diana with a satisfied expression. "You see? Our children are not just preserving what we built, they are expanding it, making it better. This is what legacy looks like." "You are right," Diana agreed, her voice warm with pride and love. "We did something good here, Russell, something that will outlast us and continue to do good for our family and our community for years to come." As they rode back down to the farm, as the stars began to appear overhead, Russell felt a profound sense of contentment settle over him. His life had not turned out at all the way he had imagined when he was a young man fleeing the ruins of his family's farm in Missouri. He had thought he would spend his life drifting, never putting down roots, never allowing himself to care too deeply about anything or anyone. But then he had ridden into Belmont on that scorching afternoon in August of 1878 and seen a young woman being harassed by a banker, and everything had changed. In stepping forward to help her, he had found his purpose, his home, and his heart. He had learned that running from pain and loss only leaves you empty, but facing fear and opening yourself to love and connection fills you with more than you ever thought possible. The years continued their steady march forward. Russell and Diana eventually stepped back from the day-to-day management of the farm, letting their children take the lead while they enjoyed their grandchildren and the fruits of a lifetime of hard work. They never stopped working entirely, though. Russell could often be found in the fields or barn, helping with repairs or offering advice, and Diana continued her sewing and baking, though now more for pleasure than necessity. In 1910, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and what felt like half of Belmont. The farm had grown into a substantial operation, one of the largest and most successful in the region, employing a dozen hands and supporting not just the immediate family, but several related families as well. Russell was 64 now, his dark hair gone almost completely silver and his face lined from years of work in the Nevada sun. Diana was 60, her hair still more dark than gray, but her hands showing the marks of a lifetime of labor. They both moved a little slower than they once had, but their love for each other had only deepened with time, aging like fine wine into something rich and profound. On the night of their anniversary, after the guests had gone home and the children and grandchildren had settled into their various rooms and houses on the property, Russell and Diana walked out to the porch of the original cabin, which they had preserved even as they built the larger house nearby. They sat in the same chairs where they had first held hands all those years ago, looking out at the land they had transformed together. 30 years? Russell said wonderingly. It seems like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know what you mean, Diana said, lacing her fingers through his. Sometimes I still feel like that desperate young woman being harassed by Mr. Henderson, and you are the mysterious cowboy who rode in to save the day. Other times, it feels like we have always been together, like there was never a time when we were not a team. We have been a good team, Russell agreed. The best. I could not have asked for a better partner in life, Diana. You have given me everything I never knew I needed: love, family, purpose, and a home. You made me believe in possibilities again. You did the same for me, Diana said softly. When you paid my debt that day, you gave me more than just financial relief. You gave me hope. You showed me that there were still good people in the world, people who would help a stranger with no expectation of reward. And then you stayed and proved every day that love and hard work can overcome any obstacle. They sat together in the darkness, hands intertwined, listening to the night sounds of the farm, the soft lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the trees they had planted, the distant sound of a child laughing in one of the houses. These were the sounds of the life they had built, the legacy they would leave behind. Russell thought about that young man he had been, riding into Belmont with nothing but his horse and his wages and a heart full of fear and loneliness. He thought about the choice he had made to step forward and help Diana, spending everything he had without knowing if it would lead anywhere. It had been an impulse, a moment of compassion that could have gone so many different ways. But it had led him here, to this porch, with this woman, surrounded by the evidence of 3 decades of shared love and labor. It had led him to a life richer and fuller than anything he could have imagined in those dark years after his parents' deaths. It had led him home. I love you, Diana, he said, the words as true and necessary now as they had been the first time he spoke them. I love you too, Russell, she replied, and they sat together under the Nevada stars, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate pasts. Years later, when Russell was 73 and Diana was 69, they sat once more on that familiar porch as the sun set over the mountains. Their children were grown and settled, their grandchildren were starting families of their own, and the farm continued to thrive under the capable management of the next generation. Russell's health had begun to decline, his body finally showing the effects of a lifetime of hard physical labor, but his mind remained sharp and his love for Diana as strong as ever. Do you have any regrets? Diana asked him one evening, knowing that their time together was growing shorter, but not afraid to face that reality. Russell thought about the question seriously, reviewing the decades of his life with Diana. He thought about the struggles and the triumphs, the lean years and the prosperous ones, the children they had raised and the love they had shared. Only one, he said finally. I regret that I did not find you sooner. I regret all those years I spent drifting alone when I could have been building this life with you. But if you had not been drifting, you would not have been in Belmont that day, Diana pointed out with the practical wisdom that had served them so well over the years. Everything happened exactly as it needed to for us to find each other. I have to believe that. Then I have no regrets, Russell said, pulling her close. Not a single one. You and our family, this life we built together, it is everything I could have wanted and more than I thought I deserved. You deserve every bit of happiness you have found, Diana said firmly. You are a good man, Russell Quinn, the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful every single day that you rode into Belmont and decided to help a desperate woman with a failing farm and a mountain of debt. "Best decision I ever made," Russell said, and kissed her as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Russell Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, with Diana holding his hand and his children gathered around his bed. He died as he had lived the last 4 decades of his life, surrounded by love and family in the home he had built with his own hands. At his funeral, the church in Belmont was packed with people whose lives he had touched, and there were tears but also laughter as people shared stories of his kindness, his wisdom, and his unwavering love for his family. Diana lived for another 7 years after Russell's death, continuing to oversee the farm and dote on her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She never remarried, saying that she had been blessed with one great love in her lifetime, and that was enough for anyone. When she finally passed away in her sleep at the age of 76, she was laid to rest beside Russell in the small cemetery outside Belmont, under a headstone that read, "Russell and Diana Quinn, who built a life and a legacy through love and hard work. Together, always." Their children ensured that the farm remained in the family, passing it down through generations as Russell and Diana had hoped. The story of how they met, of the cowboy who paid a stranger's debt and stayed to build a life with her, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of the power of compassion, courage, and enduring love. The original cabin where they had first begun their life together was preserved as a historical site, maintained by the family and occasionally open to visitors who wanted to see where the Quinn family legacy had begun. And on summer evenings, when the sun set over the Nevada mountains in shades of gold and purple, you could almost imagine you saw 2 figures sitting on that old porch, hands intertwined, looking out over the land they had loved and cultivated together for 3 decades. Their love story had started with a simple question on a dusty street in Belmont. "How much does she owe you, sir, today?" But it had become so much more than that. It had become a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of choosing compassion over indifference, and the beautiful things that can grow when 2 people commit to building something together despite the odds. Russell and Diana Quinn had taken a failing farm and a mountain of debt and turned it into a thriving legacy that supported multiple generations. But more importantly, they had taken 2 lonely, wounded hearts and created a love story that would inspire their descendants for generations to come. They had proved that sometimes the most important decision you can make is to stop running, to step forward when someone needs help, and to open your heart to the possibility of love, even when it seems risky or impossible. In the end, that afternoon in August of 1878, when Russell Quinn rode into Belmont and saw Diana Vaughn being hounded for repayment, had changed 2 lives forever. It had given a desperate woman hope and a drifting cowboy a home. It had created a family, built a legacy, and proved that love, when combined with hard work and unwavering commitment, can overcome any obstacle and create something beautiful that endures long after we are gone.